So how to get out of a rut. Now, this is a quick little sit down chat in which I wanted to have based off of a conversation which I had with a friend recently. Now, this friend had managed to achieve quite a major goal over the weekend. He had been working incredibly hard towards this goal. He put a lot of importance on it. He made a lot of sacrifice towards that goal. And ultimately, he got the outcome in which he wanted. He managed to achieve the goal at hand. He done incredibly well. And I got a message off him a few days ago. Finn, bit of a random one, but do you ever feel like you're just stuck in a massive rut after having achieved the goal? Do you ever feel completely burnt out? Do you feel like you're just in no man's land? And I could completely relate to that. We actually had a term for it in bodybuilding, funnily enough. We called it the post-show blues. Now, for those of you that don't know what that is, that's after having competed in a bodybuilding show, you feel lack of purpose. You're, of course, proud of what you did, and the show itself, the day itself was absolutely amazing. You've made a lot of great memories. Potentially, if you got the result in which you wanted or the placing in which you wanted, you're incredibly proud of what you did. But with that, you're stuck in no man's land afterwards. You feel like you're in a little bit of a rut where you have placed so much importance, made so much sacrifice and put in so much hard work towards that goal. You then don't know what to do with your life from there on out. You're like, well, shit, what do I do now? You know, my whole year, the last 4, 5, 6 months of my life potentially prepping into that show was all placed on that one day. Everything in which I was doing prior was all set for that one day. Now that it's gone, now that it's been and gone, it's in the past. What do I do now? And you can go through a stage of feeling, like I said, like you're in no man's land, like you're in a little bit of a rut. Like you don't really know what to do with your life. For me, I would prep anywhere between 12 to 16 weeks. I was almost like a horse with blinders on throughout the whole prep. Nothing else mattered to me. I didn't see friends as much as what I normally would have. I didn't see family as much as what I normally would have. I would have missed out on socials. I would have been fully in routine of up at 5 a.m. to the gym for my cardio, straight into work from there. I would have my meals at the same time each and every day. I would train at the same time each and every day. I would be at bed at the same time each and every day. But with that, once that show had been and gone, and I was no longer in that routine, I no longer had that end goal to work towards, I'd feel a little bit lost. I wouldn't really know what to do with myself. It would almost feel like a little bit of a come down, right? From having been on such an incredible high that weekend, the weekend in which I was competing in the show, the whole build up to it, right? Peak week, the carb load, heading to the venue the night before, getting your tan, making your way to the hotel room, getting a little bit of downtime that evening, waking up, sending the check-in shots across to your coach, rocking up to the venue, meeting the other athletes backstage, getting pumped up, ready to go on stage, right? It was all exciting. You're fully in the moment. Nothing else matters until you do walk out on stage, present your physique for the 10 to 15 minutes in which you do get on the stage, to ultimately then come off, get your trophy. You have a nice little bit of food that evening, potentially a day off plan after, and then what from there? You're back into routine, or at least you think you will be, and then you're slowly on a little bit of a come down from there, from having been on cloud 9. The week after, if anything, is probably going to be the hardest week of your prep, even though technically you're not in prep anymore. And with that, you find yourself just on that come down slowly as the week goes on. You're no longer on cloud 9. You don't have that end date to work towards. You have no real reason to stick to your meal plan anymore or get up and do your cardio. And don't get me wrong, there's some bodybuilders in which are absolutely made for the sport and they will be able to just get straight back into routine, the quote unquote robot bodybuilders, and go through that transitioning phase into the off season. But for me, I was stuck in no man's land. I was in a complete rut. I didn't really know what to do from there. I didn't really know where I was going to go or what the next goal was going to be. So how do we fix this? How do we get out of a rut? Because I see it in many clients as well that will potentially be dieting incredibly hard into, say, a photo shoot, a prep themselves, maybe a holiday, a wedding. Then after that event's been and gone, they're like, well, what now? And they very easily tend to fall off. So this is something in which I always try to invoke on them, and I always try to recommend they do. And that is, well, to get out of a rut, ultimately, you need to set the next goal. Now, I think it's important to reflect on what you've just done, assess how it made you feel, what went well throughout that potential prep dieting phase, camp, whatever it may be, whether it was a bodybuilding show or potentially a boxing fight, a marathon, a high rocks, whatever it was, what went well throughout that prep camp, say, how did it make you feel? What could you have done a little bit better, say? What would you do differently next time? And then ultimately just reassess. So once you've reflected, reassess, right, what's the next move for me? It doesn't have to be the exact same goal. It's not the case of like, well, if you have done a bodybuilding show, you then need to do another one next year. You need to reverse out, head into the off season, spend a decent amount of time packing on on size, bringing up weak areas, making them improvements to your physique, ultimately to then prep again the following year. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. Always do what inspires you and what makes you purpose driven, gives you that fulfillment day to day. But the most important thing with that is getting the next goal set in place and not getting too caught up in the goal in which you've just achieved. Now that may seem quite harsh, right? Well, what you want about Finn, I've just absolutely dedicated the past number of months of my life to that one goal, and you're telling me not to get too caught up on it. No, I don't think you should, in all honesty. Now, why is that? Well, because once that date's been and gone, it's like, well, what are you going to do to continue progressing and continue moving forward in life? I believe it's human nature that we always need to have something in which we're working towards, something in which we're trying to get better at, something in which we're trying to progress at, something in which we're trying to achieve. Because if we don't, you're stood still. You're just drifting through life. No matter what you're working towards, always have the next goal lined up. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be anything to do with fitness. It doesn't have to be fitness related at all. It could be, well, you know what, I've just had a boxing fight, I've just competed in a bodybuilding show, I've just done a physique photo shoot. So you know what I'm going to do from there? Well, I'm actually going to take my focus away so much from my fitness journey, and you know what, I'm just going to train 3-4 days a week, do 2 runs a week, eat healthy, and ultimately just stay active. But you know what, I want to put more of that focus now towards personal development or business growth. I potentially want to start a YouTube channel or a social media page. I want to start up the side hustle in which I've always been wanting to do. I want to potentially look to make an investment somewhere. You could shift that focus towards business, personal growth, relationships, absolutely anything. But ultimately, having that next goal set in place and continue seeing you progress, get better at something is what's important. Like I said, do what fulfills you, do what gets you out of bed early in the morning, do what makes you purpose driven. But if you ever feel like you're in a rut, it's because ultimately you haven't got that end date set in place, you haven't got that goal set in place, potentially you're not doing something that is fulfilling you. So whatever you do and whatever it is that you've just achieved, get that next goal set in place. Because I noticed that in all high achievers that I've networked with and been around, one key fundamental in which they all hold is that they don't get too caught up in the moment. They don't get too fixated or caught up in the goal in which they've just achieved. They're constantly thinking down the line at what they could do next in order to one up themselves, in order to get better, in order to progress, in order to move up the ladder. They're all looking for that next thing in which they can achieve. And that's ultimately why they get to where they are in life. So when you are working towards something, a major goal in which you're putting a lot of importance on, you're putting a lot of work in for, you're making a lot of sacrifice for, always think about what happens next, what happens after. Now, don't get me wrong, yes, one goal at a time, of course. Let's not try and get started on the following goal before you've achieved the one in which you're currently working towards. But once you've managed to box off a goal, you need to have that next thing lined up. This is a very important thing in which I run across my coaching with clients, where when they're coming towards the end of a goal, we hop on a call, we then line out the roadmap for the following goal in which they want to achieve, whether that is they're in photo shoot prep. After the photo shoot, right, this is what the following few months will look like. We're going to spend time reversing out from the prep. We're then going to look to head into the off season. This is the target scale weight. This is the training split in which we're going to implement. This is how long we're going to be running this improvement phase for. And then ultimately we line out the following phase from there. It's always important, I feel, as humans, to have something to work towards. We have that innate desire to want to try and conquer something and to try and be the best we absolutely can at something, and to ultimately set big goals for ourselves in which create that urgency, create that scarcity, make us put the work in and have us achieving something in which we potentially thought wasn't possible prior. So always have a goal set in place, because the last thing in which you want is to feel like you're in a rut. You're drifting through life, you stood still, you're not progressing at anything, you're not getting better, you're not working hard for something. That is not where you want to be. So always, after you've achieved a major goal, have a little think, reflect on what you've just achieved, reassess where you go from there, and get that next goal post put in place. So that's everything from this video. Take care, speak soon.